Rose Blanchard made worldwide headlines when she was convicted.
Sorry, I'd like to give it a minute.
2 people charged her daughter Gypsy and her boyfriend Nick Godejohn.
Gypsy manipulated Nick, a low-functioning person.
It was an angel and a devil.
Gypsy Rose Blanchard was released from a Missouri prison early this morning.
I'm doing great. It feels really, really nice to be out in the free world.
Whose idea was it?
Mine.
Who initially brought up your mother?
Brittany.
Did Gypsy know?
Honestly, she asked me to.
I did. I talked him into it.
I just couldn't see her suffering.
People call her the master manipulator. It wasn't that. It was the other way around in that relationship with her ex. It was the other way around. She was manipulated.
That's why he's in trouble to begin with, because he's the one that did it, not me. She taught me how to be a good liar. A very good liar without any conscience.
Picture this. It's June 2015 in Springfield, Missouri. The warm evening air settles heavily over the neighborhood along Volunteer Way. You're standing on the lawn outside of your neighbor's small, pale pink home waiting, hoping that this is all just some kind of joke after seeing some disturbing posts on their Facebook page. More and more neighbors start to gather outside the house, murmuring to each other that they have called the police for a wellness check, but there's no help in sight and the air is growing thicker with worry. Who made these Facebook posts? Why isn't anyone answering the door? You try ringing the doorbell over and over, and the dim lights in the house just stare back at you as if they were mocking you. Someone must be home, you think to yourself, as you look over at your neighbor's car parked neatly in its usual spot in the driveway. Eventually, the sheriff's department arrives, and a collective sigh of relief is heard as you say to yourself, finally, we'll find out what's going on. Your heart is pounding in your chest, and you feel your stomach drop as you hear someone say, but her daughter is sick and needs a wheelchair. What if she's on the ground and can't get up? Another neighbor decides to climb through the window as an officer agreeingly looks the other way, and as the man makes his way through the house, you can hear him shouting names over and over until the sound of your pounding heartbeat starts to drown his calls out. Now he quickly makes his way back outside the front door and says it doesn't look like anyone's home. The house is quiet, but all of her wheelchairs are still in the living room. You exhale deeply, not realizing that you had been holding your breath the whole time, and your hope begins to rise. Maybe this was just a joke after all. But as the hours creep into the night and emergency vehicles and police cars are piling up outside, you can't shake the terrible feeling. And as the yellow crime scene tape is slowly wrapped around that tiny pale pink house, you know that something sinister has taken place.
I see a stretcher come out of the house, and there's a sheet over a body, and I just start sobbing. That was Dee Dee.
It was only a matter of time before the rest of the world knew the tragedy that occurred in that house on Volunteer Way. Dee Dee Blanchard, the once believed magnificent mom, the saintly woman who spent 19 years caring for her severely ill daughter, was found lying face down, her life cut short. And it wasn't until police found Gypsy Rose with her boyfriend able to walk without a wheelchair that once quiet, quaint little neighborhood was about to be at the center of every news show around the world. And after 10 years, it was about to get even more twisted than anyone ever thought possible.
Breaking news this morning, 48-year-old Dee Dee Blanchard is found dead inside her home. Her 19-year-old daughter Gypsy is still considered missing.
And this is what we know. This might be one of the most complex stories I have ever covered here. The name Gypsy Rose Blanchard is a household name where, in the minds of some, she's purely a survivor, and to others, she's a manipulative liar who did the unthinkable and has now walked away. And then there are those of us who think, well, maybe it's not so black and white. Gypsy Rose's name has become synonymous with the term Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is, in its most basic definition, a psychiatric disorder in which a parent or other caregiver seeks attention from medical professionals by causing or fabricating signs or symptoms of illness in a child. Gypsy Rose was the proxy, or victim in this case, and was subjected to decades of harm at the hands of her own mother, Dee Dee. There's so much renewed interest in Gypsy Rose's Rose's life, especially now due to her release from prison and her new ebook and documentary series, but potentially getting lost in the mix of all of Gypsy Rose's newfound stardom is the other complex side of this story, her one-time boyfriend and literal partner in crime, Nick. Conversations around Nick Godejohn, a man diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder who also believes to have dissociative identity disorder, has sparked outrage as to how his case was handled, both from sympathizers to detractors. And what about this police supplemental report I never hear discussed, detailing a 15-minute cell phone video Gypsy Rose took of herself and sent to Nick, where she tells him how she is, quote, very good at planning things, how she liked to cause mischief and mayhem, and that if she ever saw a girl who wanted to become Nick's girlfriend, her evil side would unalive them with pleasure, proposing they could do it together. Yeah, we're gonna dive into it all and also hear from some mental health professionals as well as individuals living with these diagnoses to try to gain insight not only into Gypsy Rose Blanchard, but also into the mind of Nick Godejohn for a fresh perspective. Now, we all probably know that Gypsy Rose was released from prison after serving about 8 years on December 28th, 2023. In many ways, this is the first taste of freedom Gypsy Rose has ever experienced in her life, and now, as a free woman living with her new husband, we're learning a whole lot more about her life with her mother and how today she says she doesn't identify as a murderer because she didn't, quote, do the kill.
I don't associate myself as a murderer because if you think about it, yes, I had a part to play in it. I asked, he's the one that did it. So when they say I'm a murderer, I don't identify as that.
We'll get into that. But again, what about Nick, the man who did do the kill? What about Gypsy Rose's relationship with her new husband? And what about Gypsy Rose's instant celebrity and the public calling her a role model? We're most definitely going to get into that. But first, oh hi there, hello, hi, it's my face again. If you're seeing me for the first time, my name is Swoop, welcome. I'm a filmmaker and I make documentaries and short films on unsolved cases, true crime, and social media influencers who abuse their power and manipulate audiences because, as I always say, it's not drama, it's dangerous. We also dig deeper into the root psychology and sometimes we take it to Petty University because, okay, Petty is my coping mechanism and, you know, someone's gotta do it. If you wanna join our community, all are welcome, and you can also grab your exclusive Valid Ribcage apparel and the Valid Social Club apparel from the Petty University shop, linked below as always, one of my all-time favorite collections that we've ever put out. So real quick, and then we're gonna dive into the story. A huge thank you to today's sponsor and to all of you, and then we will dive right in. I want to talk about something that pisses me off about Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and like all of these streaming services. And I'm going to tell you how to make it all better with today's sponsor, ExpressVPN. Did you know that Amazon, HBO Max, Hulu, and other streaming services are hiding thousands of shows and movies from you based on where you live? They literally limit your access to shows just because of the country you live in, even though they keep charging more and more and more. The audacity. Like, imagine getting up in the morning, going to your favorite coffee shop, savoring the thought of that delicious latte you're about to get, and them telling you you can only order decaf tea. That's basically what Netflix and other streaming services are doing to you, blocking you from thousands of shows just because of where you live, and it is time to clap back using ExpressVPN and unlock their entire content library all in one tap. Basically, when you do anything online, all your activity is tracked through your IP address, which is attached to the country you're in. But when I turn on ExpressVPN, I can take my IP address and switch it to another country that I choose, allowing me to control which country I want Netflix to think I'm in so that I can instantly unlock tons more movies and shows. Now, I've been using ExpressVPN for 3 years now. It's on all of my devices. Like, US Netflix took away one of my favorite guilty pleasure shows, Vintage Gossip Girl, in the United States. Not on my watch. So all I do is open ExpressVPN and switch my country to the UK, and boom, all seasons are ready to go, honey. And also, can we talk about them taking Mean Girls off of Netflix? Because, honey, that is not okay. But as soon as I switch my VPN to South Korea, I can watch Mean Girls any time of the day, and that is okay with me. ExpressVPN works in seconds. You can use it on your phone, laptop, tablet, even smart TV, so you can watch on the big screen with zero buffering. So join me and stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Go to expressvpn.com/swoop and find out how you can get 3 months of Express ExpressVPN free and treat yourself to tons of new movies and shows. You deserve it, honey. Okay, back to the doc. All right, just a heads up, as usual with a heavy topic, I will not be going into graphic details or discussions, and things will be censored to keep this as digestible as possible for all of you watching while adhering to the platform's policies. And a couple of super quick notes. While in production, I received an email from a longtime viewer who had a request regarding what they refer to as the G slur, and I'll share a bit of that. I'm writing on behalf of myself as a Roma woman and 13 of my Roma peers. Me and my peers are writing in hopes that you can bring attention to the fact that the word G is a horrific slur for many people, and the current development with Gypsy Rose is already leading to a normalization of using the slur. We're not trying to cancel, we only want people to take the G slur seriously. Now, obviously Gypsy Rose's name is not a slur, it's her name, but I do hope in stories like this that people don't use it as an excuse to intentionally throw around actual slurs to harm others. Like, I know y'all out there watching that y'all aren't doing that, y'all are always incredible. I just wanted to share someone from our community so that we can continue to keep things as inclusive as possible. And one more quick thing, there's a lot with this one. I will also be discussing autism spectrum disorder, and I know that there can be some sensitivities with how it is discussed. After consulting with mental health professionals, I wanted to share some guidance given on how to respectfully discuss autistic individuals. The autistic community prefer identity first language, i.e. autistic person is preferable to person with autism. This is because we would say person with cancer, for example, but for most autistic folk, our autism is a core part of our identity. Avoid functioning labels such as high or low functioning. This is rooted in how demanding we are perceived to be rather than our actual needs or functioning. And terms like on the spectrum are generally frowned upon by the autistic community and should be avoided. Okay, now that I've hopefully paved that road, let's dive in. Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard was living in Golden Meadows, Louisiana when she had her first child alone. Her new husband, Rod Blanchard, had recently left her on his 18th birthday while she was still pregnant. On July 27th, 1991, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a healthy baby girl, was welcomed into the world, but at only 3 months old, Gypsy Rose began displaying signs of sleep apnea, so Dee Dee had her hooked up to monitors and tested. I mean, that would be some scary right? And on top of her sleep apnea, Gypsy Rose also had severe amblyopia, which is the medical term for what many people call a lazy eye, a phrase that I've learned is considered very outdated, that threatened to make both of her eyes go blind over time if she didn't get corrective surgery. Now, this surgery might be where it all started, and what do I mean by it? Well, I'm referring to Dee Dee's suspected mental disorder, Munchausen syndrome by proxy. With all of the attention from friends, family, and doctors regarding Gypsy Rose's medical conditions, Dee Dee was essentially getting fueled by it. She was kind of craving it, kind of getting off by it, you know? Along the way, Dee Dee had Gypsy Rose diagnosed with an unspecified chromosomal disorder, epilepsy, muscular dystrophy, leukemia, hearing and vision impairment, and that she was paralyzed, where Dee Dee forced Gypsy Rose to use a wheelchair all the time. Gypsy Rose was about 8 years old when this is happening. And when Dee Dee wanted more control, she had a feeding tube put in because, well, Dee Dee said so, and I guess that was good enough for doctors. I don't really get how they fumbled the bag there, but it happens all the time in this story. Now, according to Christy Blanchard, Gypsy Rose's stepmother, when Gypsy Rose was old enough, Dee Dee enrolled her into school, but she only made it a few months before pulling her out. Christy said, quote, Dee Dee had told me that the reason why she had pulled her out was because she was scared they wouldn't give her her medication right. So Dee Dee intended to homeschool her daughter. However, according to Gypsy Rose was supposed to teach herself how to read.
How much schooling do you have?
Unfortunately, I was homeschooled, but my education is kind of scattered, so I have the basic of a third grader.
Okay. Do you know how to read and write okay and everything? Okay, good.
And honestly, y'all, this sounds like coercive control 101, and this is a theme that we're going to see spread throughout this story. So real quick, let me give a simple definition of this, because y'all know in a Swoop doc, we don't just cover the story, we also talk about some of the warning signs of manipulative or abusive tactics, in case any of you watching are in an unhealthy environment to better understand and protect yourself. So coercive control is an act or a pattern of acts of assaults, threats, humiliation, and intimidation, or other abuse that is used to harm, punish, or frighten their victim. This controlling behavior is designed to make a person dependent by isolating them from support, exploiting them, depriving them of independence, and regulating their everyday behavior. So as we move along, I'll pinpoint like different warning signs of coercive control throughout this doc, but let's start with warning sign number 1, isolating you from your support system. A controlling partner will try to cut you off from friends and family or limit contact with them so you don't receive the support that you need. Here are a few ways to do this: suggesting shared phone and social media accounts for convenience, moving you far away from your family so that it's hard to visit them, fabricating lies about you to others, monitoring all your phone calls with your family and cutting the line off if anyone tries to intervene. Now, I'm pretty sure, like, if you're familiar with this story, Dee Dee just kind of checks off every single one of those boxes, okay? A bitch never met a box she didn't want to check off. Now, how about warning sign number 2, denying your freedom and autonomy? Someone exerting coercive control might try to control your freedom of movement and independence. Some methods include not allowing you to go to work or school, restricting your access to transportation, stalking your every move when you're out, taking your phone, and changing all of your passwords. So by denying Gypsy Rose access to education, access to family, even access to food by putting in a feeding tube, and the ability for Gypsy Rose to speak to doctors and restricting her ability to even walk and putting her in a wheelchair, Dee Dee was able to create an environment of extreme isolation. It is a tried and true tactic, and if anyone in your life is trying to isolate you from your education or support system, please know that you have options and there are people and resources ready to help. And you could start by going anonymously to thehotline.org to learn more there and find the help that you need. So with all this going on, Dee Dee's family, the Petrus, found it odd that Gypsy Rose seemed like a normal child when Dee Dee wasn't around. Like one time when they were hosting a birthday party, for example, Gypsy Rose, who was sitting in her wheelchair watching the kids jump on the trampoline, asked if she could join them, and the Petrus told her that she could, and Gypsy Rose began using her legs and jumping around. But once Dee Dee pulled into the driveway, Gypsy Rose kind of locked up and stopped using her legs again.
Everybody, this is Gypsy Rose reporting from Aurora, Missouri. I am about to dive off our porch into the pile of snow. You ready?
I don't want to point fingers, but this is weird, right? Like it's don't point. Like, I don't know, like maybe somehow it was different in person. I wasn't there. None of us were there to see the family interactions. But when you're told that a kid can't walk, but the kid is jumping on trampoline when the mom is gone and then suddenly can't walk the moment the mom shows up, like, I'm just kind of like, how did no adult in the room say anything, or did they say anything? But like, it's wild to me. Okay, anyways. So as the story goes, Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose moved in with Claude Petrus and his new wife, Laura. So Claude is Dee Dee's father. Laura is her stepmother, which makes them Gypsy Rose's grandparents. So to cut to it, Gypsy Rose was allegedly inappropriately handled by her grandfather, Claude, while they were living there. And when she tried to bring it up to her mother, Gypsy Rose says that Dee Dee began crying while also suggesting that she too had been inappropriately handled, which naturally caused Gypsy Rose to stay quiet out of fear of hurting her mother. Gypsy Rose was around 4 at this time. Now, was this just a manipulative tactic from Dee Dee to garner sympathy from her daughter, or was Dee Dee really harmed by her own father? We'll never know. But to make this even worse, Gypsy Rose's grandfather, Claude, fucking real winner over here, he didn't deny that this ever happened. Oh no! Instead, he blames Gypsy Rose, saying she, a 4-year-old at the time, was the one trying to touch him. Bitch. Listen. I need to simmer down, but I'm telling you, I don't like jumping to accusations. But if ever there were a shitty way to deny claims that you were doing some nefarious shit and making people not believe you, blaming a whole grain, gluten-free tiny child for SUL contact would be a good way to make me not believe you. It's literally impossible for someone that young to even know what the hell that would even mean, let alone going out of their way to do it to an adult. Claude is a whole ass shady bag for that and possibly belongs in jail, allegedly. This is purely speculation, but it wouldn't surprise me if Dee Dee went through the same or similar issues as a child and knew that Claude was capable of doing this to her daughter, but perhaps was in denial or felt that she had nowhere else to go. But realistically, we could be looking at a situation where Dee Dee was also a survivor of CSA, and if so, that would most likely have an impact on Dee Dee's mental and social development that people don't always acknowledge in this story. I just want to point that out. Now, just when you thought this backstory couldn't get any worse, never fear, a shitty people doing shitty things syndrome is here. Before Dee Dee had a stepmother, she had a mother named Emma. At some point along the way, Dee Dee became her mother, Emma's caregiver. Yeah, and it has been alleged that Dee Dee, wait for it, starved her own mother to death while she was in her care. What paradoxical universe is this? And if that wasn't enough, well, Dee Dee is also suspected of trying to take the life of her stepmother. Yeah, when Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose moved in with Claude and stepmom Laura suddenly became gravely ill. She literally almost died and spent 9 months in bed from what they think was Dee Dee slowly poisoning her with Roundup weed killer by lacing it into Laura's food, allegedly. This is so darkly disturbing, but if any of this is true, it's both sick and just like sad to me, you know? Like obviously there's zero excuse here for what Dee Dee was doing to Gypsy Rose and what she allegedly did to her mothers. But in the same breath, if Dee Dee was a potential CSA survivor, it's still sad. And there's a pattern here, a cycle. Now, Dee Dee's mother, Emma, passed a year before Claude got married to Laura, and Laura sadly passed in 2018. Many believe from complications from being poisoned, as she was never the same afterwards. And of course, well, we all know how the cycle ended for Dee Dee. Now, right after the revelations about Laura and Emma, many of the MISTRESS began placing the blame on Dee Dee and also accused her of not taking proper care of Gypsy Rose. Many people in the family noticed that Gypsy Rose didn't need the feeding tube and that she could obviously walk. I mean, seriously, like Dee Dee's sister even reached out to Rod Blanchard to tell him that Gypsy Rose could walk. And still, after all of this and all of the doctors, nothing was done about it. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a million things that Rod could have done differently here, but to be fair, I should point out that Rod is a shipmaster and works on a boat months out of the year and wasn't always around. And based off of the signs of coercive control that I mentioned, we also know that Dee Dee was intentionally isolating Gypsy Rose from her family, was also poisoning Gypsy Rose's perception of her father, to the point when Gypsy Rose was younger, she mentions being quite terrified of him at different points. And Rod blames their constant moving around and Dee Dee's controlling nature for not being able to see Gypsy Rose as much as he wanted to, which, look, do I think he could have done more? Yes. Yes, I do. But Gypsy Rose doesn't blame him, so I'm just gonna leave that there. So, Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose are living in Slidell, Louisiana. Dee Dee is telling people Gypsy Rose has leukemia, and doctors, for reasons I can't find, had Gypsy Rose undergo rounds of chemo and surgeries, helping Dee Dee keep her daughter as sick as possible.
I was taking medication that she said was cancer medicine. She would shave my head and say, well, it's gonna fall out anyway, so let's just keep it nice and neat.
Now, at this time in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit, destroying their apartment, including all of Gypsy Rose's medical records and her birth certificate. So weather devastation created another devastation that Dee Dee could now weaponize to isolate Gypsy Rose. And by September of 2005, she and Gypsy Rose were airlifted to Aurora, Missouri, where they rented an apartment for a few years.
It's Mayberry. We're moving to Mayberry.
It didn't take a lot to convince Dee Dee and her daughter Gypsy Rose to make a new home in Aurora. They already knew it was meant to be.
It is the perfect town. The perfect place.
While there, the locals quickly learned of Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose through their harrowing story of survival, and of course, many of them celebrated Dee Dee's perseverance and how Dee Dee would do anything for her daughter, also anything to her daughter, and Dee Dee played that it all the way up with press interviews, community outreach, just all of it.
It took something like a hurricane to make us have a happy ending.
Dee Dee was happy enough just having medical care for Gypsy. She says she never expected this.
It's amazing. It's amazing, the outpouring of love and support. And it's happy. And it's full of love.
Man, this is just so crappy. Dee Dee knew how to flex for clout. Okay, before the Logan Paul, she'd be out there flexing for all this shit. She was a master manipulator at this point. So they were given medical trips to Mercy Children's Hospital. They got to go to Disney. I mean, they were even gifted the chance to see Miranda Lambert perform, who actually donated another $6,000 to help with Gypsy Rose's medical expenses. Like, the fucking audacity of Dee Dee. Like, I look at this and I'm like, this just takes serious brass balls to work your kid into a grift like this. And all it cost Gypsy Rose was her freedom, her autonomy, her salivary glands, and even her teeth. But in spite of everything that was going on in that house, there was one thing, one singular thing that Dee Dee Blanchard could never control. And that was young, curious hormones and the need for independence, no matter the cost. In 2011, while attending a sci-fi convention, Gypsy Rose was minding her cute little business while an older man ran into her wheelchair. He apologized for the accident and she thought nothing of it. That is until a few days later. So prior to this, Gypsy Rose had received a laptop, and when her mom was asleep, she had created a private Facebook account behind her mother's back where she could connect with friends and meet boys because, you know, Dee Dee didn't allow Gypsy Rose to have her own social media, that coercive control, right? In fact, Dee Dee created a shared Facebook profile with Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose, which Dee Dee controlled.
I don't really have a computer, no.
Did you ever have a cell phone that you played around on or anything like that? No? Okay. No laptop or...
No.
So again, like, remember coercive control warning sign number 1, suggesting shared phone and social media accounts for convenience? Well, let's expand on that a bit with another warning sign, activity monitoring. When someone is monitoring what you do throughout the day, it's a way for them to subtly remind you that they're always around, judging your behaviors. Activity monitoring can include whole home surveillance technology, including private areas like the bathroom, checking your internet usage and browser history, and using tracking technology on your phone or car. So, a few days after the accidental encounter with the man at the convention, Gypsy Rose received a friend request on her secret Facebook page from a man named Dan. She recognized him immediately and they began messaging back and forth. Now, Dan was 36. Yeah, 36 years old. Way to go, Danny boy. I'm a fan already. So Dan was messaging a girl who he believed to be 15 with the mental disability. Winner, winner, dinner, Dan. I honestly wish that people would stop protecting his identity, but anyways, it didn't take long for a friendship to blossom, or as I like to put it, manipulate a young impressionable girl he believed was less than half his age. But Gypsy Rose began confiding in him, saying that she was desperate to get out of her situation, and it didn't take very long before Danny Dearest knew the biggest secret of all, that Gypsy Rose could actually walk. I mean, she literally did it in front of him. Now, around this time, Gypsy Rose found her Medicaid card that her mom had been hiding that said that she was born in 1991, not 1995 like she was told. This was a huge moment of realization for her. This meant that her mom was lying to her about her age, that she was actually 19 years old, not 15, which must have been just mind-blowingly shocking as hell. I don't even know how you would process that. And this was the way out that Gypsy Rose had been looking for. Newly discovered 19-year-old Gypsy Rose and this 36-year-old grown-ass man came up with a plan of escape. Gypsy Rose was going to leave her home, and Danny Doodoo was going to take her to his farm in Arkansas. Sounds romantic, right, Dan? So one night, Gypsy Rose managed to steal Dee Dee's phone and she began messaging Dan. He texted her and asked, "Can tonight be the night that we run away together?" I want to scrub my tongue after even saying that. You know, I'm sorry, this guy is a creep, allegedly. It's disgusting. Okay, rant over. So Gypsy Rose essentially runs away from one monster to another. allegedly. And before leaving the house, literally on her own 2 feet, Gypsy Rose left her mom a note. And at 2 a.m., Gypsy Rose hitchhiked to disgusting Dan's friend's house where he was staying. And of course, wouldn't you know, when Gypsy Rose finally gets there, diabolical Dan tells her that guess what? He's on parole! Fiddly-dee! And also, guess what? His parole says that he can't leave the state of Missouri. I am livid. Why is this man not in custody? Sorry. Needless to say, this didn't end well, and Dee Dee tracked her down, snatched her up, and then managed to procure documents saying that Gypsy Rose was born in 1995 because grifter's gonna grift. And so when the 2 gals reached the house, a massive storm ensued, where Dee Dee threatened to smash her computer, do the same to her hands, and allegedly chained her to a bed for 2 weeks. Gypsy Rose said, quote, "My mother never laid a hand on me until my attempt to run away." Right back to another coercive control warning sign. Physical V is one of the most extreme versions of coercive control. It uses physical pain to control your behavior and instill obedience. After 2 weeks of allegedly being chained, Gypsy Rose was released, and Dee Dee kept a knife on her bedside table as a means to threaten Gypsy Rose into submission, bringing us to another warning sign. Threats. Threats are declarations of impending consequences intending to create fear. Threats may involve harming things you care about. Examples of threats can include, "That better not stay that way or you'll regret it. Next time you do that, the dog is going to the shelter. You're gonna be very sorry you did that." And I would argue keeping a knife by your bedside probably qualifies. After Gypsy Rose tried running away, Dee Dee cracked down on her security, and she had papers drawn up by an attorney claiming that Gypsy Rose was mentally incompetent. Someone find that attorney! She also brought a gun as a means to scare Gypsy Rose, which would obviously be terrifying. But one day, when things escalated and Gypsy Rose again planned to run away, she got caught. And in an argument, Gypsy Rose found Dee Dee's bang bang lying on the table, grabbed it, and pulled the trigger 10 times at her mother, and her mother was hit. But the thing Gypsy Rose did not know is that weapon wasn't real. It was actually just a BB gun, meaning, and I can't stress this enough, Gypsy Rose, before Nick Godejohn entered the picture in person, Gypsy Rose had attempted, and some could say kind of virtually, took her mother's life by her own hand in that moment, just with a toy that she thought was real. So let that sink in.
She basically wanted me out of the house before then because we kept on having arguments, but I'm not a violent person. I would never ever hurt her.
Was it a heat of passion, desperation, escape? I mean, none of us were there, so we could just speculate on those reasons, but this is the thing that did happen. Now, Gypsy Rose claims that her initial emotion upon realizing it was a BB was relief, because she says that she didn't intend to end her mother, which, in all fairness, I have to look at it for what it is. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because she picked up what she thought was a real weapon and emptied it at her mother. And I think it's important to remember that 2 things can be true. Gypsy Rose she is a survivor of trauma and also capable of attempting to take a life on her own, even without Nick.
But he's the one that did the actual kill, not me. I can't kill anyone. That's why he's in trouble to begin with, because he's the one that did it.
Now, Dee Dee didn't tell people what really happened with the BB. She made up a story about being mugged, but ironically, if you kind of think about it, if Dee Dee had been honest with police about why her daughter popped her 10 times, like, yeah, Dee Dee, would probably get exposed for the grift and go to prison where she belonged, but Dee Dee might also still be alive today. Literally, Gypsy Rose popping Dee Dee with the baby could have saved Dee Dee's life. Wild. In 2012, Gypsy Rose was eventually able to sneak back onto social media and found herself on a Christian dating website. Remember what I said about hormones raging? Ain't no fortress in the world that can stop that hormonal wrecking ball. It was here that Gypsy Rose met Nick Godejohn, and within 2 weeks, they became Facebook official. Cute, right? But shortly after becoming official, one of Nick's ex-girlfriends actually messaged Gypsy Rose warning her that Nick was a bad guy, but Gypsy Rose ignored the message as she had fallen in love. She just thought this was a jealous ex. So one day, Gypsy Rose stole cash from Dee Dee's wallet and waited until they went to Walmart, where she bought a secret phone. And from then on, Gypsy Rose was able to communicate with Nick via Yahoo Messenger. And let me tell you, like, those text messages, honey, okay. Like, I read through literally all of them because, yes, I am a thorough bitch, and wow, those messages span the globe from simple to explicit to loving to Gypsy Rose telling Nick, F you, to multiple times apologizing to him for how often she blows up in anger to, plotting the end of her mother together. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. I highly suggest if you want to really have good perspective on all of this, take a look at those. But Gypsy Rose really leaned on Nick through this time as a means of escaping Dee Dee. They kind of created this fantasy life, right? She began confiding in him about her real age, how her mother was harming her, and the fact that she could walk. And Nick became very emotionally attached, taking on the role of wanting to protect Gypsy Rose through any means necessary.
He said that it's us against the world, and that he's gonna protect me no matter what.
In 2015, after they had been dating online for about 3 years, Gypsy Rose finally arranged and paid for Nick to come to Springfield, Missouri from his hometown in Big Bend, Wisconsin. Now, the plan was for Nick to accidentally meet her mother, and maybe, if Dee Dee liked him enough, she would let Gypsy Rose continue to date him. So Gypsy Rose made plans for Dee Dee to take her to see the live-action Cinderella movie, where Nick would bump into them and introduce himself, and they would invite him to sit with them in the theater. Gypsy Rose dressed up as Cinderella, and Nick was to be her Prince Charming for the evening, and initially, everything went according to plan. At some point during the movie, Gypsy Rose excused herself to go to the bathroom, still in her wheelchair, and Nick made his way there as well, and they met in a bathroom stall where they proceeded to consummate their relationship, which is, it's charming and it's sad, and just, it's so many things. As you may have guessed, the movie theater plan went to it rather quickly. By the end of the movie, Dee Dee had basically stormed out of the auditorium, making it clear that she didn't like Nick and told her daughter to stay away from him. But as we all know, when a parent tells you not to talk to a boy, you're gonna talk to that boy. You're gonna talk to that boy so hard. After the movie theater encounter, Gypsy Rose and Nick continued to profess their love for each other, deciding that they must be together, and devised, this kind of 3 options for a plan. Plan A was to get Dee Dee to like Nick. No dice. Plan B, ironically, was to get pregnant. And Plan C, well, Plan C was murder, to end the life of the one person standing in their way and to set Gypsy Rose free from her mother's control. So went from Cinderella to Cruella in 3.5 seconds over here, and, with lots of reasons why.
I asked Nick for help. And how that conversation started was, he was saying that he would protect me from anyone. I said anyone. He said yes. I said even my mother. He said yes. And then the plan kind of formed from there.
Now, I want to note that during the course of their conversations, Nick confided in Gypsy Rose that he had a dark side. According to him, it was an alternate personality named Victor, who was supposedly a 500-year-old vampire who had fantasies of SA and R-wording someone and taking life, and was willing to take Dee Dee's life. And after some more discussion and plans, including Gypsy Rose filming a video inside her home, instructing Nick on the pathway that he should take to get to Dee Dee's bedroom, complete with Gypsy Rose making knife motions over Dee Dee's bed, the plan was set, and Gypsy Rose was 1,000% committed. And days later, on June 9th, 2015, Nick arrives at their house in the middle of the night.
Hi, honey. I'm doing it. He's eating a brownie. But later he will be eating me.
In the days following Nick's arrival to Springfield, Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose Blanchard had not been seen or heard from by their friends and neighbors until on June 14th, when a cryptic message was posted from Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose's shared Facebook account.
Instantly took it as their Facebook account had gotten hacked.
When all calls to Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose went unanswered, several neighbors and friends went to their house to make sure everything was okay. They rang the doorbell and knocked on all the windows, but the house remained silent, even though Dee Dee's car was still sitting in the driveway, so they called the police.
We circled the house, knocked on all the doors and windows.
I called the police and let them know that we needed a wellness check done on a disabled mother and daughter.
So this brings us full circle, right, to the way that we started this doc at the very beginning. Remember, with all of you kind of taking on the perspective of one of the concerned neighbors at the house. When the Greene County Sheriff's Department arrived, they had to wait for a search warrant. And in the meantime, a deputy granted a neighbor permission to climb through the unlocked kitchen window to check on everyone. So the neighbor, whose last name is also somehow Blanchard, but they are not related, he only looked around the front of the house and thought that it seemed relatively quiet, though he did notice that Gypsy Rose's wheelchairs were still there. But when the search warrant came through on June 15th, police discovered Dee Dee Blanchard unalived, laying face down on her bed. Now, I won't go into details for obvious reasons, but a knife had been used 17 times and Gypsy Rose was still nowhere to be found. So
we have breaking news. The body of 48-year-old Claudinia Blanchard has been found.
Gypsy is still missing this morning.
Long story short, I think we all know what followed. At the time of the crime, Gypsy Rose let Nick in, provided him with gloves and the knife she stole and pre-cut duct tape, and went to the bathroom, and at one point was shaving her legs, allegedly, during the act. Gypsy Rose and Nick both said that they had S right after in her bedroom, though Gypsy Rose has also said that he R-worded her, and he says differently. A day after the crime, Gypsy Rose filmed Nick in their hotel room, a clip that has been played millions of times, where you hear her giggling with joy and newfound freedom and having, you know, fun in the bedroom.
I'm doing it. He's eating a brownie.
It was also discovered that Gypsy Rose was the one who had posted those awful Facebook messages about her mother after they had fled to Nick's parents' house, and for some reason even mailed the weapon to his parents' house. And soon after, police from the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department raided the Godejohn's home and apprehended Nick and Gypsy Rose, also to the shock of everyone who knew Gypsy Rose, because for the first time as all of this is happening, she's walking. Like, can you imagine the whole time you thought that she couldn't, okay? And there she is using her legs like nothing had ever happened, like nothing was ever wrong. That would just be so wild to discover.
Just step out here, we'll get you some water. Do you need to use the restroom at all?
The pair were extradited back to Missouri and held on a $1 million bond.
And I want to start off with saying things are not always as they appear.
I couldn't find a better sentence to sum all of the f***ed up things about this case if I tried. Now, many of us have seen the interrogation footage. Gypsy Rose lies throughout most, if not all of it, including acting surprised when the detective tells her that her mother's life was ended, and also accusing Nick of some heinous things.
Things okay?
I'm thankful because I have no idea why I'm here.
Okay.
Nobody will tell me anything.
Yeah, that's fine, and that's kind of why we're here, to kind of help you out with that. Okay. So how much schooling do you have?
Unfortunately, I was homeschooled, but my education is kind of scattered, so I have the basic of a third grader.
Okay. Do you know how to read and write okay and everything? Okay, good. You do have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law.
I don't really have a computer,
Okay.
no.
Did you ever have a cell phone that you played around on or anything like that? No? Okay. No laptop or...
No.
Well, we know that that's not true. She obviously did have access to all of those things, and I'm sure the cops knew that by now, and we're just trying to get a confession at this point.
If you're involved in this, then you need to tell me that now. Okay?
I'm completely 100% honest.
And let me talk for just a second, okay? I'll be honest with you as long as you're honest with me, okay? Your mom's dead, okay? Now, what I want to ask you is, your mom's passed away, okay? And she's deceased, all right? Now, what I want to ask you, did you have involvement in this? Okay. Hang on, listen to me for just a second, okay? I want you to understand something. okay?
What happened with my mom?
Okay, you just listen to me, okay, sweetheart? You know what happened to your mom, okay? You know exactly. Sweetheart, listen to me. Let's not go down that road of taking your pencil.
I don't even really know what happened.
Okay.
I came here because my mother kicked me out of my house. She and I were having relationship problems. I guess she wanted me to stay a little girl forever. She didn't really like my boyfriend. And she was like, pretty much, if you want to move to Wisconsin with him, fine, go. So, anyway, I don't exactly know the exact date he came to Springfield, but I know that I gave him the money to stay at a hotel. And, anyway, I let him know that,
Hey, hang on a minute, okay? We're going in a totally different direction here, okay?
why did I come up here? Why did something happen to my mom?
And that's what I'm asking. Why?
She had a lot of medical conditions.
Okay, this is not a medical condition. You know that. It's not a medical condition at all, okay?
And please tell me she did not commit suicide. She had bipolar.
Okay, we're not going to get off on that track. We're not getting off on that track, okay? You know what happened.
No,
you do know what happened. You were there, okay?
Wait, no.
Yes, you were. You were there.
I wasn't there.
Okay.
He said that it's us against the world, and that he's gonna protect me no matter what.
Meanwhile, during Nick's interrogation, even given the severity of what he had done, he did, in many people's opinion and mind, come across rather honest.
Okay. I guess she's your girlfriend, Gypsy.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
And you love her?
Oh, do I ever?
You love her a lot?
I was bummed my eyes out waiting for this moment where I can talk to you.
Okay.
Because I was so worried about her.
Yeah. I think she loves you too. If you love her, if you love Gypsy, then you're not gonna let Gypsy get in trouble without you being there to help her, okay?
I understand.
Can you tell me this first?
Okay.
Did Gypsy know that you were gonna kill her mother?
Honestly, she asked me to.
Okay. So Gypsy knew you were gonna do it because Gypsy asked you to.
Yes.
Why did she ask you to do that?
Because she felt it was her only way to be with me.
How did Gypsy ask you to do that? Did she ask you to do that in a text message, on a Facebook, or in person, or something different?
Well, it was more than once. I mean, you had Facebook. We would talk about it on there. We would talk about it even on Texas.
Okay.
Because, and then the truth is, okay, I'll admit it. I did actually. I will admit it.
I know. Okay.
There were several instances during the interrogation where I felt like Nick spoke rather matter-of-factly, to the point where I have almost wondered if he might not even fully have known or understood that he could have tried to lie to make himself like look better the way that Gypsy Rose tried to lie.
The only reason I did it is because I did it for me and her. That's the real reason I did it. I would have never did it if it was not for me and her.
Okay. So you wouldn't have done it if somebody else would have asked?
No. There's no way I would have did it for anyone else.
Okay, so you just
I truly do worship her to the point there's nothing I want to do for her.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think you've proved that, right?
Yes.
I think that you proved that you do what she asked you to do, if that's the case, if she did ask you.
Yeah, she did ask me.
Okay, and she asked you more than once? Did she ask you why you were here?
She asked me more than once because what happened was, at first she wanted, because the thing was is that she wanted to do it herself, but she was too, what's the word, not cautious, it's, I guess skittish is the word. I didn't want to actually do it.
Okay.
Because she couldn't live with her, so doing it.
Okay.
And, as for, me, I, honestly, to this day, I still feel guilty about it.
Okay.
I do.
Like, it almost felt like Nick was just having a casual, no bullshit conversation with someone, though there is definitely something unique about the way in which he speaks and his verbiage and the level of education and intelligence that is presenting through how he is speaking, things that we will get into later.
That was your purpose to come here, so that way you could do that for Gypsy?
Yes, because I wanted to be with her and I wanted...
So did Gypsy know you was coming here then to go ahead and kill Dee?
Yes.
Okay. So how did you get the knife? Like, where'd the knife come from? Did you bring it with you from here?
No.
Okay. Did you buy it somewhere?
She bought it for me.
Who bought it for you?
Gypsy.
Where'd she buy it from?
Online.
She bought it online?
Oh, wait, no, it was not online. I gotta get that straight. It's not
Yeah,
online.
don't lie, because you don't want to get Gypsy in trouble for something because you're going to lie about it.
I know,
Okay.
I know. She somehow found a way to get one at Walmart. I don't know how she did, but she did.
So when you didn't bring a knife from here?
No.
So when you got here, she had a knife?
Yeah.
So did she know you was gonna stab her?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was in this interrogation that the world got a deeper glimpse into the fact that Nick Godejohn had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and believed that he might have what he referred to as multiple personalities. We're definitely going to talk all about that. But ultimately, when Gypsy Rose's trial came around, she pleaded guilty to second-degree M. Now, every state has a different interpretation on what constitutes first and second degree, so just to give a little context on what that means in Missouri, second degree is ending someone with malice aforethought. Malice aforethought means that M was intentional, or the person may have acted recklessly and did not care about others' lives. Second degree is best explained by first talking briefly about first degree. First degree is ending someone with malice aforethought and premeditation. Premeditation means that the perpetrator thought about what they were doing before they did it. It can even be a brief thought. Second degree does not require premeditation. The lack of premeditation or planning is the key factor that makes it different from first degree, which is all incredibly interesting to me, given that what Gypsy Rose did was clearly premeditated. But every state has a different interpretation of first and second degree, so here are the broad strokes of how second degree is defined in the state of Missouri. In order to prove that the defendant committed second degree, the prosecutor must show beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant ended an individual without lawful justification, which is also incredibly interesting to me, knowing that Gypsy Rose willingly pleaded guilty to ending her mother, when now she says that she doesn't identify as that.
Like, it's something that I'm gonna have to address, because it's always in my comments. Like, why are we glorifying a murder and this and that and the other? And, you know, I don't want to have to remind people every single time that I'm not the one that committed the act of the kill. He's the one that did it. So when they say I'm a murderer, I don't identify as that.
Now, I believe the prosecution and defense both agreed that given the awful things that Dee Dee was doing to Gypsy Rose for all of her life up to that point, that yes, she planned and executed the plan, but had also suffered. I mean, what she endured is truly heartbreaking. So the attorneys agreed that second degree was appropriate, and she was given the minimum 10 years with the possibility of parole in 8, while also testifying in Nick's trial.
Whose idea was it to kill mother?
Mine.
Why did you want to kill mother?
Because I wanted to be free of her hold on me.
Did you and Nick ever talk about this?
Yes,
Who initially brought up mother?
I did.
And of course, as we all know, Gypsy Rose was just released on parole after 8 years and is now a free woman. And Nick, well, he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. No chance of parole, no red carpets, and no relationship with Gypsy Rose.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Nicholas Godejohn, guilty of murder in the first degree.
And this is where things really start to go sideways. There's something interesting to note about Gypsy Rose's release from prison on December 28th. The world around her has changed in an almost inconceivable way. Gypsy Rose was sentenced in 2016, and over the course of her time behind bars, became a bona fide pop culture icon, for better or worse. Only a year after she was sentenced, HBO released a documentary titled Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. That same year, Dr. Phil did a feature on Gypsy Rose, complete with an interview, and a scripted show, The Act, dropped in 2019 on Hulu, featuring Joey King as Gypsy Rose. Over time, with each and every piece of media released pertaining to the Dee Dee Blanchard case, interest in Gypsy Rose grew into an almost cult-like frenzy, one that Vogue Australia aptly referred to as being like, quote, people anticipating an album launch. Countdowns were started online for Gypsy Rose's release. TikTok stan accounts popped up documenting every update. Not even one day after her release, Gypsy Rose posted a selfie to Instagram captioned, "First selfie of freedom," and obtained over 7 million likes in an account that bafflingly had nearly 9 million followers. I mean, her TikTok is even more eye-popping with like over 10 million followers. But Gypsy Rose Blanchard, whether she likes it or not, has morphed into a bona fide influencer, and according to her IG bio, a Munchausen by proxy advocate, and one who, like many traditional influencers, has products to promote, a book and a Lifetime series by the name of The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. For weeks following her release, people online were buying everything that she was selling. For a while, you could go on TikTok and find people breathlessly calling her queen, icon, mother. I mean, you see people give her reverence in the way that some others might give to someone like Beyonce or Taylor Swift. I mean, Gypsy Rose Blanchard was Gen Z and Gen Alpha's newest girl boss, a woman who pled guilty to second-degree murder. Vogue Australia summarizes it best when they chalk it up to, quote, our collective obsession with the girlhood trend of 2023. Barbie, coquette, and girl dinner were fixtures of the zeitgeist. Camp femininity was in. 2023 was proclaimed to be the year of the girl. It was the year where gaslight, gatekeep girl boss was turned up a notch when the internet started making up hypothetical excuses for hypothetical girl crimes. This current view of girlhood as a trend through the lens of the internet hinges on the idea that consequences, especially ones under the current corporate capitalist plot of life, are null and void when we plead the blissful ignorance of the childhood experience. End quote. So, as Vogue puts it, it's not really so much the idea that people actually believe Gypsy Rose worthy of standing, so much as the very act of femininity being like above criticism in the eyes of very vocal people propping her up. You know what I mean? I mean, it's probably no surprise then that like not even a few weeks after her just like meteoric rise, the public started to turn on her for a number of reasons. First, an appearance on Nick Viall's Viall Files podcast started going viral on TikTok.
I don't associate myself as a murderer because if you think about it, yes, I had a part to play in it. I asked Nick for help. And how that conversation started was, you know, he was saying that he would protect me from anyone. I said anyone. He said yes. I said even my mother. He said yes. And then the plan kind of formed from there. But he's the one that did the actual kill, not me. I can't kill anyone. That's why he's in trouble to begin with, because he's the one that did it. So when they say I'm a murderer, I don't identify as that.
Another moment that stuck out in the public's eye was on the red carpet for A&E. Now, for those of you who don't know, when she was in prison, Gypsy Rose found new love and a husband named Ryan Anderson, a special education teacher from Louisiana, whose relationship with Gypsy Rose was primarily held through letter writing until her release.
We're being intimate for the first time, so the spark is plenty alive. Yeah. Blowing, so it's all good.
And since Gypsy Rose got out, the two have been inseparable to a possibly TMI degree.
I'm on a high right now. I'm living my best life, and y'all can't take that from me.
And the D is
fire.
Okay. Anyway, this inseparable pair were on the A&E red carpet one day and were speaking when this happened.
I think one is, you know, people call her the master manipulator. It wasn't that. It was the other way around in that relationship with her ex. It was the other way around. She was manipulated.
So to be clear, when you collect a bunch of moments like these, people start asking a lot of questions about the level of accountability Gypsy Rose is or is not taking, and I want to consider all perspectives here. It can successfully be argued that she served her time and therefore accountability has already been reached with her. However, yes, Gypsy Rose is a survivor and nothing takes away from that. She did not deserve any of what her mother did to her, period. And in the same breath, because two things can be true at the same time, Gypsy Rose pled guilty to ending the life in the second degree, admitted to plotting her mother's demise, obtaining the weapon to do it, created a video detailing to Nick how to do it, again, complete with those, motions, and physically opened the door and let Nick in to carry out her plan at a time she chose in advance. Premeditated and orchestrated by Gypsy Rose, primary, and Nick in there to help. And so for her husband to say that Nick was the master manipulator of all of this kind of confuses me.
I think one is, people call her the master manipulator. It wasn't that. It was the other way around in that relationship with her ex. It was the other way around. She was manipulated.
And for Gypsy Rose to not correct him, and for her also to say that she doesn't identify as what she factually pled guilty to, confuses me a bit more.
If you think about it, yes, I had a part to play in it. I asked Nick for help. And then the plan kind of formed from there. When they say I'm a murderer, I don't identify as that.
Again, to clarify, in terms of what's factually correct in the eyes of the law, since for whatever reason Gypsy Rose or her PR team have pulled away from that, putting aside for a moment what happened to her growing up, it is valid, it will always be valid. In regards to the crime, Gypsy Rose was not simply an accessory in the way that I think she's trying to interpret and now frame it. I mean, and in a lot of people's minds, the premeditation would say that it is first degree. And something else that gave me pause was when she emphatically said that she could never take someone's life. I mean, remember earlier how it came out that Gypsy Rose literally, popped her mom 10 times with a BB gun during an argument, not realizing that it was just a BB? Well, here's what Gypsy Rose said in interview.
He's the one that did the actual kill, not me. I can't kill anyone. That's why he's in trouble to begin with, because he's the one that did it.
You do what she asked you to do, if that's the case, if she did ask you.
Yeah, she did ask me.
Okay, and she asked you more than once? Did she ask you why you were here?
She asked me more than once because what happened was, at first she wanted, because the thing was is that she wanted to do it herself, but she was too, I guess scared is just the word. I want to actually do it.
Again, two things can be true. Gypsy Rose was terribly harmed, and there's no such thing as a perfect victim. But she did pop her mother with her own hand, and she did premeditate and facilitate and help carry out and see through the plan of taking her mother's life, and pled guilty to doing so. And given that she has dutifully served her time, I'm just a bit confused on why she is now seemingly walking back her role in this and placing it much more in Nick's lap than a shared responsibility with her as the one who planned it from the start. I mean, I think it's safe to say that Nick would never have done this if Gypsy Rose hadn't asked and planned it.
Honestly, she asked me to.
Okay. So Gypsy knew you were going to do it because Gypsy asked you to.
Yes.
At some point you decided to mother, is that correct?
Yes.
When was that?
Thoughts of it started a year prior to the murder actually happening.
Whose idea was it to mother?
Mine.
Did you and Nick ever talk about this?
Yes.
Who initially brought up mother?
I did.
So you wouldn't have done it if somebody else would have asked?
No. There's no way I would have did it for anyone else.
Okay, so you just
I truly do worship her to the point there's nothing I want to do for her.
But lately, I've been struggling, right? Because I'm so just get on the fence with some of these things because I really want to be supportive of her in regards to the things that she survived that no one should have to go through. But I've been feeling more and more like Gypsy Rose blames Nick almost fully for why she had to spend time in prison. There's even a Q&A from Gypsy Rose via her ex-prison mate saying the following, quote, question, what is your feelings towards Nick? Do you regret meeting him? Gypsy Rose's answer, I don't have any feelings for him. He is my ex. He is my past, and I do regret meeting him. Had I met a real man who I confided in to help me get out from under my mother's grasp, I would not be sitting in prison right now. A real man would have called the authorities to get me away from her. I take my responsibility for my part of the crime, but he played the bigger part. It's perplexing, and it has caused me to question and second guess so many elements of this very nuanced and complex case. On one hand, I'm incredibly sympathetic to what she survived. She should not have had to live through that. And on the other hand, she took it to an extreme that even she herself, let's be clear, has admitted she had other choices. She has acknowledged she had other choices and chose not to take them, and that her mother did not deserve to lose her life.
I was processing it all, but I felt a sense of guilt because I'm hearing these words like, your mother was a whatever, she deserved it. And I'm like, no, she didn't. I think the one thing that people think is that I hated my mom, and I'm like, no, I loved my mom. I just wanted out of that situation. I wanted out of that home.
So as you may have guessed, people have started to correctly point out that she can't actually have it both ways. She did indeed identify as that in the second degree, which is what she served her time for, but now people are questioning the degree of accountability that is or isn't being taken here.
I think that we both, like him and I, both have a lot of regrets. Obviously I wish that this would have never happened this way. Now for him specifically, I did my time. I know he's doing his time for his part of things. I hope that whatever he does with his future, because he is spending the rest of his life in prison, I acknowledge that I am the reason for that. However, I don't feel either that it's a situation where it's a sympathetic type of situation.
Okay.
And I mean, the reason why I say that is because in my past relationships, I've had 2 relationships since I've been incarcerated. And each one of my exes and even my husband is like, baby, if you would have asked me that question, if you would have said, hey, can you kill my mom to get me out of this situation? They would have said, no. Okay, no, we're not doing that.
Let's go to the police.
Let's go to the police. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna get you out of this situation, but let's go to the authorities, all right? And we're gonna do this the right way. Nick did not say that. He has these dark fantasies. He wanted to do it. It was a fantasy he lived out, and he's paying the consequences for that. So with that being said, it's neither here nor there for, in my opinion, what I think of the situation. It's just, it is what it is.
It is what it is an interesting way to sum this up, and I'm honestly, I'm not trying to dig into her. I know this is incredibly nuanced. I'm just not at all sure why it would be appropriate to try and compare what her husband says he would do in this situation, as if he's gonna be like, say anything else, but to compare him to what she planned and asked her online boyfriend to do over 10 years ago while she was in the throes of her mother's control and suffering. It's just, I don't see how we can compare these 2 situations.
Nick asked me, are we still doing this? Am I still, coming there to do this? Yes or no? And I said yes.
Who talked you into killing your mother?
I did. I talked him into it.
I mean, her husband has never, will never, and can't ever relate. It just, none of us can, right? And for some reason, it feels like they're all blaming Nick for doing the very thing that Gypsy Rose talked him into doing to protect her.
He said that it's us against the world, and that he's gonna protect me no matter what.
He was saying that he would protect me from anyone. I said anyone. He said yes. I said even my mother. He said yes.
She felt guilty about the whole situation. I had to make sure she was safe. And meaning, I had to make sure she felt like she could be comforted by
you. Okay.
Yes.
Gypsy Rose is a free woman now. They have the luxury of hindsight. It's impossible to compare her husband to Nick in that situation, in my opinion. So pointing this out shakes up some of the nuance in why Gypsy Rose Blanchard appeals to the public at large in the first place. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is indeed a victim of her own mother. Part of why she has become a larger-than-life figure in the public eye has to do with the idea that Gypsy Rose represents what can happen when somebody with trauma, kind of gets revenge on their abuser, for lack of a better phrase there. Her fame softens the impact of what she actually did into a much more black and white description of a victim. Gypsy Rose is a victim. She is also somebody who planned and took a life, not some, random celebrity as people were quick to paint her upon her release. Which leads me to another point that I've seen thrown around. Whether or not Gypsy Rose should be seen as a role model for doing whatever it takes to free oneself of the person harming them, or, as she has also said, be with the one she loved. Because if Gypsy Rose is a role model for this, then naturally, in the essence of fairness, would one then need to ask, what does that make Nick Godejohn?
The next thing I know, I ended up going right into it and thought there was no going back because I had myself on my word, and I was not one to break my word to really anyone at all if I had one to keep at the time. If it was worth keeping, I was going to keep it.
This is Nick Godejohn in an interview from prison stating that he was unwilling to break his promise to Gypsy Rose to help free her from Dee Dee. Gypsy Rose confirms this when she admits to People that, quote, "It's not like I didn't think of every other option besides murder." I even ran away from home, and within 4 hours, she found me and brought me back, putting in place paperwork saying I was incompetent and she had power of attorney over me. I was trying really hard to figure out another way. One night, Nick said, I will do anything to protect you, and I said, anything? He said, yes. I have a lot of very specific thoughts about this, but I don't know if I can articulate them as poignantly as I would like to be able to yet, because it is so nuanced. Because again, I'm not trying to dig in, but also there is a coldness and a detachment from the reality of her actual involvement and what she actually did, and I don't understand that. And now, due to her sudden celebrity, many questions online have been raised. If Gypsy Rose is a role model, an icon, does that make Nick the savior, the white knight that rolled out the red carpet and paved the way for Gypsy Rose to be an icon? If Gypsy Rose had no way out of her situation other than this, if she believed that, if that's what it was, which many people argue in favor of, then does that make Nick her hero, the man who took action to give her the freedom she longed for? If she is to be praised for fighting back, is Nick also to be praised for being the tool used to achieve this freedom? So then I have to ask, is it appropriate to celebrate one and condemn the other? Should we be condemning both? Should we be celebrating both? Should we celebrate no one and just leave them where they are? And then other questions come out of this. If we are celebrating her and what she ultimately did, should we then reopen cases or release from prison other survivors who took the life of their abusers? Or is that crossing the line? Where is the line? I don't actually have all of the answers here, and my mind sees the cases to be made on all sides. And let me be clear, there's really nothing in me that could condone the taking of a life. I struggle a lot even with the idea of the death penalty for people who've done just the most awful things. But just a piece of my personal context, I have survived violent and heinous abuse and SA that went on for years, but I still can't mentally get there. I couldn't imagine doing that to the person who did those things to me. But everyone's situation is different, right? And in reality, no one except Gypsy Rose truly knows if she knew there were other options at the time. But I do find it quite interesting that there doesn't seem to be a clear answer on where this leaves Nick. If we're celebrating what Gypsy Rose did, he's the one who helped make it happen. Now, many have quoted Nick saying, I would do it again, without continuing the rest of the quote, as if to mean that he is a cold-blooded criminal who has no remorse. And I don't know, maybe he doesn't. However, I think it is important to share that the full context of his quote is actually, quote, I would have done it again. I might have done it differently, but I would have done it again. I couldn't see Gypsy Rose suffer anymore. He wanted to end her suffering.
I would have done it again. I really would have. I would have done it again. I might have done it differently, but I would have done it again. I just couldn't see her. I couldn't see her suffer anymore.
So do with that what you will. Can one be the hero and make the other the villain? Quote, he was saying that he would protect me from anyone. I said, anyone? And he said, yes. I said, even my mother? He said, yes. We're going to shift now into a segment that I like to do in these docs called Perspective. This is where, after going through the story from one main person's perspective, like Gypsy Rose and Dee Dee, now we're going to flip it and try to see this from Nick's perspective, whether it's in favor of other people or not, to try to understand more about what might have been going on through his mind. So it's kind of a bit of devil's advocate, if you will, respectfully. And this is something I like to do to really try to see the information for what it is and try to strip some of the natural biases that we may have developed as onlookers on the outside. Listen, we all have biases. If you are human and living and breathing, you have bias. Even the director of Gypsy Rose's Lifetime documentary that she is promoting and doing the red carpets for says that they are now very close friends, which then, of course, would lead one to ask, if the documentary was made by a close friend, was it edited in a biased way to make the story look a certain way or not? This is just kind of the nature of of the beast here. And one of the often overlooked parts of this story relates to Nick Godejohn's diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, as well as the speculation that he may have dissociative identity disorder, or DID. Nick's mental health was brought up by his defense during his trial, but was ultimately a non-factor before he was found guilty of first degree and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
And there's no doubt in your mind that he is on the autism spectrum disorder scale, is that correct?
Yes, I believe he has enough autism characteristics that he meets the definition for autism spectrum disorder.
Now, I should note that some states like California allow parole eligibility for first degree, but the state of Missouri does not. It's either the death penalty or life without parole and nothing less. And I always think that that's an important distinction to make, as the sentencing doesn't always reflect the severity of how the crime is interpreted from state to state. Someone could get life without parole here and it be considered less heinous of an act than someone in a different state who has the ability for parole. You know what I mean? Now, when Nick was interviewed for the show Killer Couples, he stated that from the very first step he took into the house on the night of the crime, he knew that there was no turning back. And he referred to the idea of having an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other, sort of like you see depicted in cartoons.
Basically, it was an angel and a devil. I actually had two different ones speaking to me. They both said one thing and left the decision up to me. First, the angel spoke, which I wish I would have listened, because it's really weird, because that only reassured me that my original idea of what we should do would have been the right thing to do. But it actually said, his very actual words was, take her and run. That's his very words. We had the other part of me, and yeah, that darn devil. For some darn reason, I don't know why it inflamed the emotion of enrage, but it did. It inflamed emotion and rage.
Nick's talk in regards to the good angel and the bad angel relate to the claim that he's stuck to for the entirety of his story, that he exhibits multiple personalities in what is known modernly as dissociative identity disorder, DID. It is very important to note that Nick has never formally been diagnosed with DID, but through testimony after testimony, he often refers to a devil within himself and has even said that his, quote, evil side enjoys taking life. This was even waxed on by Gypsy Rose when she spoke to ass Dr. Phil in 2017.
He said that he was psychic and that he had these premonitions. He thought that he was a 500-year-old vampire named Victor.
A 500-year-old vampire named Victor.
Now, there are two broad potential scenarios here. Nick either has DID and firmly believes that one alter is violent while others are not, or he may be leaning into the pop culture iconography of, you know, the devil on my shoulder. Now, I'm not a mental health professional, so I won't lean one way or another, nor can I make any claim as to whether or not Nick is fully aware or not of the status with his own mental health. However, to get some insight on Nick's mental health from a more informed outside perspective, I went to y'all for the answers. I reached out via Twitter to see if any of you were either experts in autism spectrum disorder, which we'll refer to as ASD, or DID, or if you yourself have been diagnosed with either and would be willing to answer a few questions regarding Nick Godejohn's ultimate place in the story. I wanted not only the opinions of more qualified minds than mine, but also a chance to have some of you representing the ASD or DID community to have some representation here. We love you and we thank you for being in this community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To establish lived-in experience, I asked everyone what it was like living with ASD or DID. Ghosty, who is diagnosed with both, told me, quote, "We were diagnosed with DID in November 2022, but have struggled with it most of our upbringing without understanding. Having autism growing up, we were always in special needs class. As an adult, it has led to several learning setbacks that make it hard to work a normal job outside our house, being glued to a set routine indoors. DID feels like a constant series of glitches switches throughout the day. Nothing is as simple as it seems. For someone who doesn't dissociate, memory is jumpy, often not fully remembering details of things, just pieces. We will never be a fully consistent self. We are all so different as a system, which leads to struggles within relationships with family, friends, everyone. What Ghosty's system describes is sadly common throughout the answers in regards to what life is like with DID and living as an autistic person, though every experience is unique. Mr. Cheeseball, who is currently 40 and has ASD, said, "Living with it has been hard. I have the emotional reactions of a teenager. I'm in therapy for it currently." Now, one of my anonymous answerers said, quote, "I feel very isolated living with autism. You're not normal enough for the normal kids, but not disabled enough for the disabled kids, so there is never a place to fit in." Now, in addition to Twitter, I actually received a video response from Instagram and TikTok creator and autism advocate Rebecca Faith Cruz, who had this insightful answer.
When people find out that I am autistic, they often infantilize me. And at times when I ask very valid questions, there's this almost preschool-like tone where they talk down to me like I'm a 5-year-old who cannot understand. There is a lot of stigma surrounding autism that I think can be summed up in one word, and that is incapable. No matter what it is, we are thought to be completely incapable.
The reason I'm sharing all of these testimonials up front is to highlight the diversity in symptoms of both ASD and DID, as well as helping establish the idea that one person's diagnosis is not another person's diagnosis. But in each testimonial, we find that issues exist that can make life much more difficult for people living with both. This was also backed up by a number of experts that I spoke to, including Christina Murray, who is a licensed mental health clinician in the state of New Hampshire, who states, "A good amount of my clients have ASD or symptoms of ASD and have not been formally diagnosed. DID is much rarer in my experience working in mental health, but DID can typically manifest from untreated complex trauma, meaning if your PTSD is not treated and there are additional factors, then you could be more likely to develop DID." Before even getting into questions pertaining to Nick and Gypsy Rose, each participant shared their feelings on whether there were stigmas surrounding ASD and DID, and whether medical professionals accurately diagnose both. Unsurprisingly, everybody agreed that there were in fact stigmas, and virtually everybody saw issues with accuracy in diagnosis. One anonymous response said, "Yes, there are a lot of stigmas around ASD that take place all across the spectrum. I believe that it's hard to get an autism diagnosis wrong, but I do believe that medical professionals often refuse to diagnose autism due to their own personal biases," which, if that's the case, that just is so irresponsible of professionals. Christina Murray spoke more directly on DID, stating that DID is often stigmatized as something scary or something you would see on a talk show, or worse, glamorized and romanticized on screen. So we know that Nick's ASD diagnosis was brought up in trial, and his attorney attempted to use it as an explanation that he wasn't fully capable or aware of what he was doing.
In elementary school, he was diagnosed with autism. Nick was autistic, and perhaps he was unable to form the necessary intent to commit the first degree.
A low-functioning person with autism.
There's been a lot of debate about whether or not this is true, and if this is something that should be brought up in trial, or if it's further stigmatizing ASD. It also begs the question, are people with ASD or DID more or less likely to commit a violent crime, or is that not a factor? Christina Murray believes it is actually quite helpful for diagnoses to be brought up in a criminal trial. Quote, "In my clinical opinion, mental and behavioral health is no different than medical health. A good amount of my clients residentially are here because they were too unsafe to be in the community and need treatment, but they still have criminal charges or have done something that led them to this place of needing help. Some of them are violent. My colleagues and I have been choked, punched, SA'd, or attacked by teenagers, and have been lots of physical restraints. It's part of why they are here, and the inability to regulate or manage their emotions due to the trauma and lack of appropriate caregivers in their lives lives teaching them those skills. And first of all, let me just give you a huge thank you for the work that you are doing. I can't imagine how difficult it can be on a day-to-day basis if those are some of the things that you are facing, but I am so thankful that people like you exist that are helping people who need the support. Danny Van Derzen Smith, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, an autistic coach from the UK who provides training for the National Health Service on Autism and Neurodiversity, agrees, stating, I think neurodivergence certainly can be relevant in the sense that we need to be able to understand a defendant's experience and motivations more accurately without neurotypical assumptions. Quantum Kitty also states that diagnoses of ASD and DID are relevant at trial, and I feel like ignoring it doesn't take into account an extremely important and relevant part of a person's health and ability to commit a crime, their culpability. Most DID patients have a protector alter, and while not always dangerous, they certainly can be. And with ASD, we don't always have control over our reactions either. Some of these answers split down the middle in terms of perspective. One anonymous person states they can't stand diagnoses being used at trial because they believe it creates a larger stigma than there already is. It can be seen as a get-out-of-jail-free card to many people. There are cases where said person is manipulated into doing said crime, since autistic people, folks with DID, tend to be more reliant and dependent on someone. Now, Ambrosia states, I think it's important to highlight diagnoses, but it could create negative stigma towards those who put in the work to rework that stigma. And far more definitively, when Anonymous 3 was asked if someone with these diagnoses are more likely to commit a crime, they said, quote, people with ASD and DID are more likely to be subjected to abuse than they are to committing violent crime. Rebecca agrees.
Bringing up Nick's autism diagnosis within this trial is extremely harmful. It perpetuates this idea that autistic people are violent, when autistic people statistically on end are far more likely to be the victims of violent crime than we are to be perpetrators. As an autistic person, I feel as though Nick was looking to be violent. And I feel as though his autism was an excuse to not be held accountable for that violence.
Now, according to Nick, this is why he believes he has DID.
I should actually bring up another moment when I was 14 years old, and that's when I first glimpse of it. This is when I realized that all the other things that were building up in me were basically jeopardizing my inner happiness, my inner peace, and all the rest of that. Because I remember seeing one night, it was at 9 o'clock at nighttime, I was in my grandma's house. I just remember looking in the mirror and I saw a glimpse of something I didn't recognize in my eye. And then it went away. It was almost like something was trying to tell me, oh yeah, I'm there. You've created me, I'm there. And so really, I knew there was a darker part of me, and I was actually quite terrified to actually explore it. And now I actually regret exploring it with Gypsy. She's the one I hoped I would be brave enough to actually explore it with me, just so I understand what's inside.
Now, it's important to know that interrogation footage exists of Nick's mother remarking on his exact state of mind, not only at the time he ended DD, but throughout his life. And I pretty much never see anyone reference this footage. Perhaps it's not as, sensational, but Nick's mother did raise him and was with him every day of his life, presumably, and she has a perspective that has a right to be heard as well. She mentions that Nick had been told Nick's mental development would forever be the mind of a 15, 16-year-old with an IQ of 82.
We always keep a close watch on him because he has... And that's
Has he been diagnosed with...
Okay, so that's why we kind of, treat him like when he was last doctor he talked to, they said his mind is probably always going to be 15, 16, right around there. So we always try to keep a close watch on him. When he said he wanted to go down there, I was a basket case. I'm like, you've never been out on your own.
I do think it's interesting that Nick's mother said she was a basket case the first time he went out on his own, because he's never done that. And when he was leaving this time and the taxi pulled up, she said, it's not okay for you to just take off. You didn't tell us where you're going. Nick was a 26-year-old grown man physically when he was leaving the house to be with Gypsy Rose. So it is not, in my experience, common for a mother to have this much concern concern over their 26-year-old grown son leaving the house unless perhaps he had a history of not doing well on his own, perhaps due to his mental health. To me, this suggests, and I believe she is suggesting, that there's far more to his mental health disorder than some might think, which lines up with his mother saying that doctors told her that he'd have the mind of a 15, 16-year-old. Like, I would worry about a 16-year-old getting in a taxi and going off on their own. Now, let's be clear, IQ tests are not a perfect barometer of one's intellect, but it is worth noting that Nick's IQ score of 82 is what is considered to be on the low side of a low average IQ. So with the score of 100 being a theoretical average in an IQ test and anything below 70 signifying a sign of mental disability, Nick has what IQtest.org refers to as a lower average intelligence level compared to the general population. However, it is important to note that this doesn't mean they lack intelligence or are incapable of learning and developing skills. Instead, it suggests that they may require more time or different methods to process information and learn new concepts. This score is just a snapshot of their cognitive abilities at a particular time and can change with education, experience, and personal development. Nick's mother also makes it a point to mention that after a life of non-violence on Nick's end, according to her, she claims that Gypsy Rose was in fact the person who got in his head by orchestrating everything.
He knows what he's done is wrong.
Yeah.
He knows that, he says that he would have never hurt anyone if it wasn't for Gypsy. Absolutely. And his love for Gypsy. He says she wanted him to do it.
Oh my God.
But he's doing fine. He cried a lot. Today, when I spoke with him briefly, I had to tell him about the warrants and stuff, and he cried a lot. Not necessarily about the charges. He's like, okay, he appears okay with that part of it, but the part that he's never going to see Gypsy again or you or whatever.
So she amazingly got in his head pretty well.
I understand that completely.
And it's weird because I almost feel like Nick's safer right now than having her orchestrating him doing anything. You know, it was like everything she said, he would, no, okay, baby, or whatever, and
which I think is also fascinating, given that this interview with Nick's mother happened before Nick's trial, where Gypsy Rose also said, I talked him into it.
I did. I talked him into it.
So the questions being raised are, did Gypsy Rose get into Nick's head, or was Gypsy Rose someone forced to be submissive to a terrible mother, just doing what she thought she was supposed to do to please her boyfriend? And on the other side, was Nick's head composed of a lower average intelligence level IQ and ASD diagnosis? Was he more vulnerable to being manipulated into doing something like this? Did Gypsy Rose manipulate him? If she did, was it intentional or was it subconscious, given the harm that Dee Dee had on her psychological development? And what of this 500-year-old vampire named Victor? Well, Gypsy Rose has said that she used to create different personalities to match Nick's alleged alters. One of them was a girl named Ruby who wore black and a red wig. Now, I want to read some from a police report that I've actually never heard anyone talk about. This is a supplemental report from the Greene County Sheriff's Department detailing the contents of a 15-minute cell phone video that they found that Gypsy Rose had made and sent to Nick. So here's from the report. Hi, sir, this is Ruby, and I'm making this video as an introduction video. Gypsy Rose admits Ruby is the most evil side of her. Gypsy Rose stated in this audio video she likes to get in trouble and she is not sorry when she gets caught. Gypsy Rose stated her caring was broken and she was not scared of law enforcement, but she would be scared of Nicholas's evil side. Gypsy Rose stated she would do anything with Nicholas, to include M, R-word, and assault. Gypsy Rose tells Nicholas if at any time, so this is recounting what she is saying in the video to Nick. So in the video, Gypsy Rose tells Nicholas if at any time a girl tried to become his girlfriend, she would end their life with pleasure and there would be lots of gore. Gypsy Rose stated if a girl was trying to get with Nicholas for S, she might allow it, but if the girl tried to get with him as a girlfriend, she would take her life or they could take that life together. Gypsy Rose goes on to say how if it were family members unalived, she would not be so brutal and she would have to step back and let him handle it. Now, Gypsy Rose talked about how she was very good at planning things. Gypsy Rose said she liked to cause mischief and mayhem, but Nicholas would have to put her in charge of all the planning, which of course is striking given that Gypsy Rose is the one who planned the unaliving of her mother, asking Nick to carry it out for her, right? Gypsy Rose stated that she comes up with very, very bad ideas, and then she referred to her bad ideas as robbery, R-word, vandalism, and stealing vehicles. The remainder of the video, Gypsy Rose talked about her and Nicholas bonding when they could finally be together. It's kind of chilling, right? On one hand, on Gypsy Rose's side of the perspective coin, she has said this was her first relationship. She was just wanted to make Nick happy, and she would play this Ruby role to become whatever he wanted to appease his darker Victor side, which could be entirely true. On the other hand, from Nick's mother's perspective, Gypsy Rose manipulated and got in his head, made him do things that he never would have done otherwise, like discuss R-word and taking a life. That he was more impressionable, that he had the mind of a 16-year-old. He was more vulnerable to being manipulated. So let me ask all of y'all, what explanation do you think makes the most sense here? And I mean, is there an explanation? Now, Nick's mother goes on to say that she even believes that Nick is safer being in prison than associating with Gypsy Rose at all, and that Gypsy Rose is a beast.
You know him better than anybody probably in the world, so you know what he's thinking, you know how he's feeling, and you know what's going on with him.
Yeah.
And all I can do
weird
for
that I
you.
almost feel like he's safer.
Yeah.
It's really, really bad to say, but I almost feel like he's safer now than having contact with her on a regular basis, knowing what I know now.
Yeah.
It's really sad because he is a good kid, and he's a good-looking kid, and for him to ruin his life over that, I'm sorry, but she's a beast.
Yeah.
Something that is odd to me, and again, we're still looking at this from potentially Nick or his family's perspective. What is odd is the evolution of Gypsy Rose's responses regarding her involvement in what happened to her mother. So more recently, Gypsy Rose's ex-prison mate and close friend Rachel Garlick has released some messages that she says Gypsy Rose allegedly wrote while in prison. Now, essentially, Rachel Garlick was posting some videos of Gypsy Rose on social media after Rachel had been out on parole while Gypsy Rose was still in prison, with Gypsy Rose's permission, until Gypsy Rose eventually asked her to take the videos down.
So there were some people that got in Gypsy's ear, and there was a big misunderstanding. Our friendship's fine, everything's great now, guys, but Gypsy's been really stressed out due to the mixed information that she's been getting from haters, so we just think it's best that we take everything down pertaining to her.
Rachel was also allegedly acting as a sort of liaison to Gypsy Rose, where people would submit questions to Rachel, she would get them to Gypsy Rose, and then Rachel would post Gypsy Rose's answers online. And one of those answers was interesting. I have read it earlier. Question: what is your feelings towards Nick? Do you regret meeting him? Answer: I don't have any feelings for him. He is my ex, he is my past, and I do regret meeting him. Had I met a real man who I confided in to help me get out from under my mother's grasp, I would not be sitting in prison right now. So it's interesting to me that she keeps kind of leaning into this, well, if he was a real man, I wouldn't be in prison, even though it was essentially her plan and she asked him to execute it. Interesting. So if we look at some of the evolution at trial, she said that she talked him into it. In her People interview, she said, it's not like I didn't think of every other option besides M. I was trying really hard to figure out another way. In interview now, she said that she requested, then asked Nick for help.
If you think about it, yes, I had a part to play in it. I asked Nick for help.
She says she's the reason he's in prison.
You know, I hope that whatever he does with his future, because he is spending the rest of his life in prison, I acknowledge that I am the reason for that. However, I don't feel either that it's a situation where it's a sympathetic type of situation.
She pled guilty to second degree, though it was premeditated, but doesn't identify as a murderer because Nick is the one who did it, right? The evolution.
I can't kill anyone. That's why he's in trouble to begin with, because he's the one that did it.
And that it is what it is.
He wanted to do it. It was a fantasy he lived out, and he's paying the consequences for that. So with that being said, it's neither here nor there in my opinion, what I think of the situation. It's just, it is what it is.
To a red carpet where she holds up a microphone to her husband as he states that Nick was the master manipulator.
I think one is, people call her the master manipulator. It wasn't that. It was the other way around in that relationship.
I'm confused, y'all. On one hand, Gypsy Rose is still processing quite a lot and should be given time to do so. And I think probably out of the public eye and not on the red carpet. I do not think what is happening is healthy. And on the other hand, she says that she's taken accountability while also seemingly diminishing her role every time I catch new interviews with her and diminishing from what she actually pled guilty to doing.
Is she is she taking any sort of, is she like, well, okay, it was me too, or is she trying to put it all?
She takes some responsibility, but not much. Not much at all.
I don't fully know what to make of this. I do have some pretty firm thoughts, but I'd rather open the conversation up to all of you in the comments. Like, what do you think of this? Is this just clunky communication? Is it misunderstanding? Is it manipulation? Or is it just what it is?
It's just, it is what it is.
Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear what you think about this. Now, Nick's past criminal history is often brought up when discussing the likelihood of whether Nick will offend again. Back in 2013, Nick had problems with the law relating to indecent exposure when he was found watching pee and self-pleasing for 9 hours in a McDonald's. Another factor that's brought up is Gypsy Rose alleging that Nick expressed wanting to S.A. Dee Blanchard after the act, with Gypsy Rose stating she told Nick that he could do that to her after the crime instead. Of course, he has a different perspective and interpretation on that. These points are often brought up on both sides of the debate surrounding Nick in regards to his state of mind, his IQ, his diagnoses should have mattered in regards to his sentencing, or if it should all be left out. This has led to discourse surrounding Nick that I wanted to navigate because there's a question starting to heat up in the wake of the remarks Gypsy Rose has made about this case. Did Gypsy Rose Blanchard coerce Nick into ending her mom? In an episode of Killer Couples, this was asked to Dr. Mark Feldman, an expert on Munchausen syndrome by proxy and author of the book Dying to Be Ill, True Stories of Medical Deception, who believed that Gypsy Rose, whether she meant to or not, manipulated Nick. Quote, she was the one who was trapped in an unfortunate situation and wanted to escape, but he ended up being the mechanism for the M of Dee Dee, and that does show some real skill in manipulating another person, even though Nicholas had his own psychological problems even before he met Gypsy Rose. This wasn't sort of an instant decision, and in a real sense, she groomed Nicholas to be the instrument by which Dee Dee was ended. Coupled with multiple testimonies establishing the idea that Nick Godejohn is almost honest to a fault, Nick's mother stated that Nick will tell the truth no matter what.
He definitely did it. He definitely told us exactly how he did it, and it matches.
He'll be honest. He's honest.
Yeah.
He's honest.
And it matches everything he said. Matches our scene and everything, and it's consistent. And I
just want you to know that whatever he's done, he is a good kid.
I get that feeling when I talk to him.
He is a really good kid, and anything you ask him, he will be honest with you.
Okay.
Now, with this in mind, going back to my Twitter interviews, Ramasta told me that they believe Nick was manipulated by Gypsy Rose, whether she realized it or not, but he deserves his conviction. Quote, at the end of the day, he did M someone, so yes, his conviction makes sense. He made the decision and had multiple days to think it through, understand what he was considering and the possible outcomes. That's not to say that he would have correctly understood the most likely outcome. I do not necessarily agree that life without parole is the fitting sentence. More needs to be researched on ASD and how it affects thought process. Now, Quantum Kitty agrees, stating, Nick seems very sweet, protective, and mostly childlike. I don't see him as violent and my heart has always gone out to him. Gypsy Rose was horrifically manipulated. She didn't deserve any of what her mother put her through, but people who have been manipulated can become very good manipulators themselves. What about the professional point of view? Christina Murray believes that Nick is somebody, quote, on the receiving end of that untreated complex trauma, likely mixed with ASD. That makes him view the world as unsafe, mixed with thinking distortions, ASD, and viewing the world as rigid, black and white, a need to make things right, combined with disruptive attachments, his enmeshed relationship with Gypsy Rose. However, in regards to Gypsy Rose, she states that she is, quote, also a person that presents with clear trauma symptoms, and with what we know of her story feels accurate. Gypsy Rose's lack of appropriate relationships with caregivers, minimal social interactions, or ability to develop appropriately due to medical negligence played out with her relationships we see now. She wasn't able to develop a healthy sense of identity and is now trying to catch up. She didn't have the skills to problem solve other solutions to manage her distress and tapped into a fantasy world with Nick to get her needs met without maybe understanding how this could play out for her in the real world. Now, another professional that I spoke to, a mental health nurse in the UK, admits they haven't looked into Nick all that much, but they take a firm stance against Gypsy Rose, stating Gypsy Rose comes across as a manipulative character with a strong desire to coerce or control a situation. The reason I say this, her story of events has changed so many times. She states she has a low IQ, but actually is intelligent and continues to play the victim of harm to get her own way or through life. Whilst the trauma she experienced by her mother was shocking, I believe there has been a period of learned behavior from this and now has adapted this lying, manipulating way to get through life. Now, on the opposite end of this opinion is Rebecca, who said,
Gypsy Rose is a very complicated person, but at the end of the day, I feel as though she was a person who was trapped. I cannot imagine the trauma that her mind and physical body went through. I would not make the same decision that she did, but I also don't feel like she felt she had a choice. I do not disagree with Nick's conviction. He actively chose to partake in this violence. I do believe he should be in a psychiatric facility where he is getting the proper care that he deserves. Just locking him away, it is doing a disservice to the mental health community as a whole.
Danny Smith provides a nuanced take, stating that, quote, from what I have seen of the confession footage, Nick seems to be quite an honest person, a common autistic trait, perhaps even to his detriment. I do think he genuinely cared for Gypsy Rose. I also think that there is clearly all sorts of concerns about his choices and conduct that go way beyond his autistic identity. One thing I don't see mentioned is the autistic propensity to get severely affected by perceived injustice. It is plausible to me that Nick's overwhelming sense of injustice Gypsy Rose suffered spurred his actions, as well as, I'm sure, other things. I'm not sure that Gypsy Rose has had much of a chance to be her own person yet. Danny's point of view is interesting, since it's a point of view Nick's own mother seems to agree with.
Well,
Good-natured kid, you know?
he definitely did it. He definitely told us exactly how he did it, and
He'll be honest. He's honest.
Yeah.
He's honest.
Now, Danny finishes their statement by declaring that Nick's conviction was correct and that his diagnosis shouldn't change the fact that he did indeed commit a crime. Quote, autistic people are just as able to understand such consequences as our neurotypical counterparts, and attempts to suggest that we aren't do nothing more than infantilize us. Now, ultimately, we'll never know exactly where the truth lies with Nick Godejohn and what exactly was going through his mind. All of these points of view serve to highlight the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the nuance of talking about someone who is not only an autistic person, but may also have DID and is in this loving relationship, the IQ. There's a lot of factors. Danny brings up, though, a great point when they say that Nick shouldn't be infantilized as an autistic person and needs to face the consequences of his actions that can further contribute to stigmatizing autistic individuals. And Christina's point that punishment for the crime and proper treatment can exist in tandem is an important one to consider as well, in my opinion. So thank you again so much to everyone who provided their thoughts on this to help broaden this perspective. I really do appreciate you all, and even those of you who answered that I couldn't fit into this doc. I will be doing more Q&As like this in the future.
There was a lot of things, criminal activity that she was doing that I grew up in. I watched her do all these things. So for me, it is a conscious effort to, go back in my mind and realize that is the wrong thing to do. This is the right way to do things. I don't think I'm like my mother at all. I try actively not to be.
When it comes to the story of Gypsy Rose, the truth is that everything boils down to a cycle of generational maltreatment passing from one woman to another to another. Now, this idea has been referred to as a cycle of abuse by some experts, but I want to make it clear that it's only tangentially related to the cycle of abuse theory, which relates to romantic relationships and how harm fosters itself within them. In this context, when I'm talking about a cycle of abuse, I'm speaking about it in generational terms, as Elizabeth Hartney did for Very Well Mind, when she examined how, quote, people who were SA'd in childhood may have a higher risk of being in adult relationships where they are harmed physically, emotionally, or sexually. In some cases, people who were victimized may become harmful themselves. So now this is further backed up by a study from 2021, co-written by Jason Armfeld of the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, who found that there was, quote, very high risk for familial maltreatment among children whose mothers had been maltreated as children. Specifically, 83% of all specific and substantiated child maltreatment cases involved kids whose moms had a history with CPS when they were kids themselves, meaning that harmful mothers were likely to have been harmed as kids to the point of CPS getting involved. In contrast, kids whose moms didn't have that history only saw a 5% incidence of harm. Even when taking CPS out of the equation, the study found that 30% of children experienced harm from mothers who also experienced harm or neglect from their own mothers by the time they were 12. And this has been a common reoccurrence in academia for years. In 1989, a New York Times article referred to, quote, 1/3 of people who are harmed in childhood becoming harmful themselves. Now, this is a lower percentage than many experts had expected, but obviously poses a major social challenge, right? The research also confirms that harm in childhood increases the likelihood in adulthood of problems ranging from depression and overuse of alcohol to sexual maladjustment and multiple personality. Now, let me be fully clear right now. Just because someone has been a victim does not mean they will become an abuser. The numbers themselves even support that when you see them hovering around 30%, but it has been observed that it is more likely for harm to manifest generationally, a form of trauma, spreading from one parent to a child and beyond. This is a very unfortunate but helpful metric in which to look at the Blanchard family, right? Like, think about it. Dee Dee was likely to have been taught by someone in her upbringing that lying and manipulating and stealing was a means to get what you want. And based on stories from the MISTRESS family, I think the obvious answer lies in both Emma and Claude MISTRESS, right? We already know that Claude was allegedly harmful to Gypsy Rose and was possibly likely harmful in some way to Dee Dee. And Emma? Well, Emma was known as a liar, manipulator, and a thief who very well may have harmed young Dee Dee. It's no coincidence that Dee Dee was raised by a woman like this, becoming a liar and a thief herself, and also allegedly a first-degreeer herself, with Dee Dee possibly ending her mother, Emma, through starvation. I mean, the parallels just kind of draw themselves here, right? Then Dee Dee allegedly tries to poison her stepmom, then she grows up, harms Gypsy Rose. Gypsy Rose grows up, devises a plan, and assists in ending Dee Dee's life. There is a pattern here, carrying through most of the women. I mean, we even maybe see some signs of Gypsy Rose potentially continuing some semblance of the chain of control when she interacts with her husband, though to be fair, none of us are privy to the day-to-day interactions between them, so just take this, with a grain. But we have seen the following: jabbing him when he speaks to get him to be quiet.
Like, what's the worst that could happen?
It's hard to do, but you can do it.
Clinging to him and possibly squeezing or tapping his arm whenever she doesn't like that he's speaking on camera or saying something she doesn't want him to say.
Yeah, Gypsy, people are on the watch. Like, people protect her, and which is great.
That's great.
All the way up to telling him to shut up, quite literally on camera during an interview. She didn't think people could hear her.
And now I feel like, oh, I went from 19 to 32. Jeez, God, I got old so quick. How did that happen?
You never went to school either.
And in each of these instances, the moment Gypsy Rose elbows or tells her husband to literally shut up, he immediately goes silent and his head and his eyes drop to the floor in what feels like total shame. I mean, he just looks completely defeated and deflated there. Now, this is just me speculating, of course, but ultimately these behaviors could be, maybe, in line with what we know about Dee Dee's own relationship with Gypsy Rose, particularly how Dee Dee physically handled Gypsy Rose when press cameras were rolling. It was a way for Dee Dee to closely control the narrative, and I think it's safe to say that there are concerns that Gypsy Rose could be falling into similar patterns now with her husband, whether she realizes it or not. I mean, I hope for everyone's sake that the cycle ends here, albeit it ended brutally, but I just hope that Gypsy Rose can move on with her newfound freedom and find the healing that she likely needs. Okay, as always, please excuse the brief tone shift as a bit of a palate cleanser, and then I will conclude with my final thoughts on this. So here are some cute videos of the billing department babies who are all grown and just living their cutest possible lives. They're just the sweetest. Be sure to grab your pieces from the brand new Petty University Valid collection and the Valid Social Club collection by tapping the link below and in the pinned comment. I love seeing your selfies and reposting you on Instagram whenever I can. I truly believe that you are going to love these pieces as much as I do. Please keep tagging me in your photos on Instagram so that I can share you on my Instagram stories. And also be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. We have hit 100,000 followers on Instagram. I'm going for 150 so I can feel like a real influencer, people, okay? Will you join me on my quest to be a real influencer? Also follow me on Twitter. Both of those are linked below. That's where I do post most often, almost like daily, especially on Instagram. I have polls, check in on life, and I will also be posting more opportunities for you to be featured in my upcoming docs. I also have officially launched a brand new second channel called Swoop 2, T-O-O. It's a little more unhinged over there, and we dive into the cesspool, not the cesspool. We're taking the suspects, we're putting them in the cesspool. So we cover all kinds of dark, bizarre, mind-bending stories, true crime, absurd influencer disasters, and mystery and spooky things. The videos are also much shorter over there, so if you want a mini dive, that's what we're doing. I'll have the newest video linked below and pinned in the top comment here, so be sure to subscribe to my second channel and take a dip with us in the cesspool. A couple of shout outs from my last doc on Ruby Franke and the final part of my 8-passenger series. Honey, that story was absolutely wild. If you haven't seen it, it is also linked below. First shout out goes to Paulette, who says, I laughed out loud when I heard Ruby saying her words, imagining doing all of that horrible stuff to your own family and have the audacity to say that she deserves to rot in a big pool of hot sus, and I agree. And I think she probably, her sentencing is like, us coming up in a couple of days. Yeah. The second shout out goes to Chris Chaos, who says, sorry, did Ruby Franke's attorney really say that she needed to essentially sit in the corner and think about what she's done in order to understand that CA is bad? Am I understanding that right? You are understanding that right. That case was wild. Yeah, I agree. If you want to be my next shout out, make sure you're following me on Twitter and retweet this video right here. Be sure to go to expressvpn.com/swoop and find out how you can get 3 months of ExpressVPN for free by tapping my link in the description and enjoy all your favorite new shows and keep your browsing and information safe and secure. You deserve it, honey. This is perhaps one of the most challenging, confusing, sad, and interesting cases I've ever covered here. On one hand, you have a survivor, Gypsy Rose, someone who has survived the type of DA and suffering that very few people could imagine as a victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And while yes, Gypsy Rose did plan and plead guilty to taking the life of her mother, and many see it as self-defense, the law doesn't really agree, and realistically, there are tens of thousands of survivors of CA and CSA and MSBP who have also endured truly heinous harm who don't take that course of action. Now, every story is different, but that doesn't mean every story is exempt from analysis and comparison from the general public as it's unfolding. That's just kind of human nature, right? Was it Gypsy Rose's only option? No, and she'll tell you that it wasn't. Did she know that she had other options at the time? Her interviews would indicate that she likely knew, but that doesn't mean she was processing that at that time, and no one but Gypsy Rose will ever come close to knowing the answer to that. But were her actions justified? The 10-year sentence would suggest no, they weren't. That's why she was convicted. But it's not such a black and white question for most people. And what about Nick? Was he the mastermind like her husband claims? Gypsy Rose, the mastermind. Was there a mastermind at all, or just a perfect storm of two hurt individuals coming from unique and vulnerable backstories colliding together at the wrong place and the wrong time? Was Nick's sentence of life without parole the right one? And what about the public? What about the millions of newfound fans and followers propping Gypsy Rose up as an inspiration and a celebrity? In many ways, Gypsy Rose has no control over the fascination of the public, though of course, yes, she is feeding into it. She is doing red carpets and press tours. But you know, to many, she has every right to make her money and reinvent herself while using her experience, as complex as it is. But Nick, of course, won't get that chance, and to some, and perhaps even to Gypsy Rose, that's what he deserves. Others are more sympathetic to him. But if the public is celebrating Gypsy Rose for fighting for her freedom, does that make Nick her Prince Charming, her literal savior who gave her freedom? While I don't personally think Gypsy Rose should be so highlighted as an influencer or a celebrity, simply because I don't think it's healthy for her or anyone to just be thrust in the spotlight while still processing something very heavy, I do hope for her and her family's healing. I hope that for Nick and his family as well. That's really all I can do, is hope for that they each get the appropriate help and support that they need, and that true accountability is always taken for each role, no matter what that looks like. But you know, I guess time will tell. Stay ready, stay petty. Class dismissed. Swoop!